This is a study that we conducted in New York and Pennsylvania. This has a kind of funny beginning. A number of years ago, I was at a conference, the ASHA conference, the international conference that they held in Philadelphia that year, American Speech and Hearing Association. And I was talking to a group of speech therapists about this kind of work, and they liked it because it involved communication training, and they had a very important role in this with us. And at one point I said, you know what would be really cool? If we had kind of, I don't know, like a little device that if you pressed it, it would actually speak. And we could have a device and you press it and it would say things like, help me, or come here. So that'd be really cool. And they were so polite. They just kind of smiled, nodded. And then the head of the association came up to me afterwards. She was very nice, and she was saying, that was a great talk. And she put her kind of arm around me. And she didn't say, you fool, but she might as well have said, you fool, because she said, there's a whole industry that makes these devices. They're called assistive augmentative communication devices. And there's lots of them out there. So once I got over my embarrassment, started to talk. She was the head of the Pennsylvania Assistive Device Center at the time, which was kind of a lending library of these things. So I said, well, why don't we work together on a project where we take individuals who are not verbal, who could use these vocal output devices, who also had behavior problems. Could we teach them to communicate with the world with these devices? So what we were looking for, by the way, was an alternative to sign language. And the reason why we're looking for an alternative to sign language is that sign language is often used very, very idiosyncratically for the kids that we work with. For example, I was in a classroom once, and I don't really know sign language that well, so I often have to ask for help. And a kid was sitting there and did this. And I said, sorry, I don't know what that means. She said, well, that means he wants to go to the bathroom. Okay. Took him to the bathroom, brought him back. At one point he went, said, oh, I think he's saying he wants to go to the bathroom. She goes, oh no, that means he wants music. Okay. So I'm not telling you I'm not really good at this, so maybe I'm not picking it up. And then a little bit later he went, music, bathroom, I don't know. She said, no, that means he wants to go home with his Uncle Jim this weekend. What? Now, she might have been right. He might have been very subtly communicated all these things with that. But even if he did, that doesn't help him, because she's the only one that knew that. Okay? It's like being in a foreign country and having an interpreter, and the interpreter leaves. You're stuck. Okay? And then you get frustrated because you can't communicate with the world. So what we've been trying to do is get systems that everybody could understand. But you don't have to train someone when they say this, you do this. So that's why we went to the vocal output devices. And here's some of the data from the study. We worked with 30 kids. We had a federal U.S. Department of Education grant to actually work with kids who were in need of vocal output devices, who had severe behavior problems. We could buy the devices for them. And this was back at a time where they were really expensive. Even simple devices were really expensive. Now, we actually modified some of these, even the talking picture frames. You know, you can get a real tiny little device for a couple of dollars, really, and use it at a very simple level. But we were able to buy the devices. What we asked then, this was a fairly complicated study, because what we did was said, we're not going to do the training, meaning I'm not going to do the training. What I'm going to do is we're going to identify kids, we're going to identify their teachers, we're going to bring them to workshops like this. We'll do a 2-day workshop. Teach them how to do an assessment, teach them how to identify the right device, and teach them to use the device, teach them how to do this intervention. And then the teachers are going to go out, take the devices, they're going to go out and use them with the kids, they're going to videotape what they've done, and we're going to assess how successful they're going to be. So basically, the teachers were going to do everything. What they did then was did an assessment, and here are just some of the kids, the study. All of them had pretty severe and multiple behavior problems. They taught them to use the device. Behavior problems went down. In the second phase of the study, they took Matt to the store, Allison to the mall, Mike to the movies, Ron at the store, David to the library. would the community be able to understand them communicating with these devices? Now, this was the first time we'd ever done this, and we didn't really know what to expect. We just did it. Now, we learned a lot by that first experience. One was, a lot of these devices don't work really well in the community. You need volume control. Sometimes the volume isn't high enough. We have a video of a kid at McDonald's trying to order a meal at McDonald's, a noisy McDonald's. He's pressing this thing and you can't hear it, and people are getting frustrated. So we learned a lot about that, about what to program into the machine, because what works in the classroom may not be what they need in the community. So we learned a lot about that. What we did, by the way, after this study was actually a much larger study to look at conversation skills training. How do you teach now beyond just I want, to how do you have a conversation with somebody? And I don't really have time to go into the details of it, but what we did was we had two groups of kids. One group, both groups, what we did was put them with a device and a typically developing peer, so a kid without special needs. One group, we taught them how to use a device to have a conversation. You press this, you say this, you press this, you say this. The other group we put together on a project. Put the device out there, but didn't teach them how to use it, and had them work together for an hour, a couple hours a week. The idea there was to give them something in common. What you saw in that video was a group of kids that have almost nothing in common trying to artificially go through in a conversation. What we wanted to do with the project was put together these two kids that at some later point you can say, remember when we did this? Or are you like this? Give them something in common. What we found was that we would do that. One group got skills training, one group got the project, and then we'd flip them. People got skills training, then got the project. People got the project, then got skills training. When we later tested them, the people that got the project first had much more elaborate conversations. They would switch topics more often than the kids who got training first. So what we tried to point out was that you have to do both. And it may help to do that in a context. So you can't just teach the skill, you have to give them something to talk about, you have to give them something to be interested in. What we've been talking about, actually mostly I've been talking about this, you've just been listening. What I've been talking about is what would be called accessing natural communities of reinforcement. The world out there can give you what you want if you know how to get it. I feel like one of these motivational speakers, you know. Listen and the world will come to you. It's out there. God, this does sound like motivational speaking. You can become a millionaire. What we're trying to do, again, beyond just stopping someone from engaging in a behavior problem, is to replace it, but replace it in a way that is meaningful to other people, okay, so they can respond. So the woman who was blind, who could then hand out this thing, she could communicate with the world. She could get the reinforcer that she needed from the world. Now, I don't ever intend to portray to you that this is the cure for all behavior problems. This is the only thing you should do. But this is one of the best researched techniques now out there to help teaching behavior problems. Now, I've already talked about a number of things. There's a whole lot of things I haven't talked about as far as looking at a person's lifestyle, making major changes in the way they live, which are all essential to this process. I haven't talked about how you plan, and I know there are probably other opportunities for you to hear about how you would do what might be called generically futures planning. So where do we want this person to be next year? Where do we want them to be in 5 years and 10 years? Because that will all guide all of what we're doing. You know, the kind of things you're teaching them to communicate will be in part guided by where you want them to be next year. You know, where do you want them to be in 5 years? What do you want them to be doing? So all of those things come into play as you're designing these interventions. And I put up there that maintenance myth. There's no such thing as a treatment that will work with behavior problems if it goes away. Okay, so whatever you do, if the treatment goes away, the behavior problems will probably come back. However, if you can build the treatment into the person, which is what we're trying to do, then they take the treatment with them. And that's where we are at this point.